Self-care is not selfish. Like, you take care of yourself so that you can show up for others. Like, that is actually how it shows up.
Today, I have a special treat for you. This is a conversation from our webinar with Neal Sundberg and Nicholas Wooters. This is The Edge of Human and AI, a Viva la Coaching podcast. We sit right where coaching meets AI, and we're not afraid to ask the uncomfortable questions. We built this show because the coaching landscape is being reshaped by intelligent systems, and the organizations, leaders, and companies shaping that future deserve honest conversations. I'm your host, Rebecca Rutschman. Each week, we'll help you understand how AI is transforming coaching. We discuss leadership development and human growth across organizations. We will help you navigate the ethical and strategic decisions that come with bringing AI into the coaching space. You'll hear from researchers, innovators, and industry leaders, as well as experts who are reimagining what's possible. Whether you're navigating AI for the first time or already building with it, this is where you belong. Follow us now and join us at vivalacoaching.com. Come stand with us at the edge. We're starting our podcast with a special season from the leading voices of the NYU Coaching and Technology Summit 2026. We will bring you bold, unfiltered conversations at the frontier where coaching meets technology and artificial intelligence. Expect real talk, sharp minds, and unfiltered conversations where we dare to ask the difficult questions. Neal is the Director of Care Programs and Provider Enablement at Brightline, a pediatric behavioral health company. He spent over a decade in the mental health space and previously led and scaled the coaching department at Headspace. His mission? To showcase the value of health coaching for preventative needs. And he believes there's no better population to benefit from coaching than parents. Nicholas Wooters is the co-founder of Coya, where he's bringing the principles of athletic performance to everyday life. With a background also as a professor at Stanford in the School of Medicine's Health and Human Performance Department, and by the way, he's a triathlon coach, Nicholas is passionate about pairing cutting-edge wearable technology with coaching to help people optimize their human performance, whether they're professional athletes, first responders, or stay-at-home parents. Both Neal and Nicholas are also fathers navigating the beautiful, challenging world of high-performance parenting. In this conversation, we explore what it really means to show up 100% at work and at home, why self-care isn't selfish, the power of boundaries and transitions, and how wearable technology can give us the awareness we need to make better choices for ourselves and our families. This is a conversation about leadership, wellness, coaching, and the ripple effect of how we show up, not just for our teams, but for the people we love most. So let's dive in. Hello and welcome. We have Neal Sundberg and Nicholas Wooters today with us for this episode.
So glad to be
Happy to be here.
Yeah, great. I'm really looking forward to this discussion because it's very dear to my heart and now to yours as well, and this of my co-founder, Eva. So this has been a very special request episode for us. And to get us started, I would love to maybe you to introduce yourselves just quickly and think about what our audience today might really want to know and understand from you before we get started.
So my name is Neal Sundberg. I have been in the mental health space for over a decade, but more recently in the startups, the digital health and coaching world, where I got to, previous to my current role, lead and scale the coaching department at Headspace. My current role at Brightline is the Director of Care Programs and Provider Enablement. which Brightline is a pediatric behavioral health company. Specifically, what I do and the what I support is our Bright Life Kids contract, which gives all parents with children 0 to 12 access to our pediatric coaching services, so long as you're a resident of California. And so it's completely free, no insurance necessary. But really, I think, mission in my career, especially at this stage, is just really to showcase the value of health coaching for subclinical and preventative needs and really push the advocacy so that health systems can adopt it. And I don't think there's a better population that can benefit more from health coaching than parents. So, I'm honored to get to do the work that I do at Brightline, honored to get to be able to speak to this topic today as well. So again, thank you for having me, Rebecca. I'm excited to talk about this.
Yeah, thanks for that. And how about you, Nicholas?
Yeah, my name is Nicholas Wooters. I come at this from a little bit of a mix of an academic and athletic background. So an athlete my whole life, and then got into coaching at the collegiate level here in the United States. And then ended up kind of transitioning over to the academic side, where I was a professor at Stanford in the School of Medicine, Health and Human Performance Department for probably about 10 years or so, while I was the triathlon coach there as well. So a little bit of mix that brought me at the kind of crossroads, really, of looking at wearable technology, sleep recovery sciences for optimizing performance. And so it was really a performance lens for a vast majority of my life. And I think that started Coya as a co-founder of Coya to really take the principles that exist in athletics and how do we actually take them outside the athletics world and put them for the everyday person, right? The everyday person. I think about the term of human performance. And a lot of times people think about human performance in terms of in athletic space. But I think about just us performing as humans, walking around this planet. How do we just kind of optimize that performance? And so been building our company for a number of years. Really grateful and fortunate to work with a bunch of organizations from the high performance space in professional sports to the first responders and police space to stay-at-home moms and dads and everybody in between. So trying to take the most cutting-edge wearable technology, pair it with coaching to figure out how do I take the data that we're getting from this wearable and make it actionable for me specifically? And what are the tools I can use where now I can get the feedback from the wearable to say, hey, this actually works for me. This impacts my body. This is the right thing that I should do in this moment to expand everybody's tool belt. I think one thing that Neal and I definitely align on is so many of the greatest tools that are out there for people to utilize are free. They're available to us all the time. We just maybe don't know the right time to utilize them and pull them out, be that breath work or recovery or hydration or whatever the case might be. I think some of those foundational things, bringing those to everyday people to try to help them, live a better life and have more energy to pour into things that matter most to them. A lot of the times, that's their children, right? So excited for this conversation as well.
Yeah, now you said the magic word. Yeah, once children enter your life, I think you automatically become a high performer. So, and
exactly
if you
right.
have been in a leadership role already in a performance role, then you become what? A double high performer?
My kids knocked me down a peg, so I don't think I elevated at all. I think my kids brought me down a peg. So yeah.
They also helped you grow.
Yeah, for sure. Yes, absolutely. No, I'm grateful to have them. I have three. I have a daughter who is 14, a daughter who's 11, and I have a maniac son who's 9. And so they keep me on my toes for sure. And tell me all the things I'm doing wrong on a regular basis. So they keep me honest. That is for sure.
Yeah, I know also from you, Neal, you have also entered the life phase of a high-performing parent.
Yes, my son is about to turn 1 in a week. And so it was a really interesting experience to get to transition my work at Brightline at the same time as becoming a parent. And so grateful that those two things have intersected and I've been able to learn alongside that work while also in my personal life. So it's been exciting.
So how did that change also your daily work routines and how you're approaching all this now, having to manage the family at the same time?
I think one of the really interesting things is on one hand, I can't not acknowledge how fortunate I am and grateful that I get to do remote work and I get to be in meetings and then step out of them and pop into a room where our nanny is and get to, just spend a brief moment of time with my child and get to, in those small moments, make him laugh and smile and then go right back to work. But because of that, there's also like this weird kind of blurred boundary between work and my personal life and my work or my life as a parent. And so that's been really interesting trying to like juggle those things. I would say I've always, struggled with boundaries at work, but like now it has truly become a non-negotiable when I do get to spend my time with my child. The most important thing for me is being able to be present in that moment, to not be thinking about work, to really be there. And I will say that has been the biggest thing that I've really had to implement. And it's turning Slack off my phone. It's turning emails off and making sure that I truly do have a start and a stop time to my work. So I think on one hand, it is incredible and I am so fortunate. On the other hand, it really has been a learning experience as I've kind of balanced those two roles.
Thank you. And you, Nicholas, how was it for you?
Yeah, that rings so true for me. We lived in California when I was working at Stanford. The traffic in Silicon Valley is a wonderful part of the experience of living there. But I didn't maybe understand the value that it provided for me until I moved. We live outside Washington, D.C. now. I work from home. Love it. Super fortunate to Neal's point to be able to be with my family more often. But sitting in traffic, leaving work by the time I got home, created a space that was really, really valuable to me that I didn't realize until that space got removed, right? It gave me time to digest. It gave me time to transition. It gave me time to kind of process the day in a way away from my loved ones that they didn't maybe have to get thrown into that mix. And I've learned that I have to create that. For me, I have to create that space. And so for me, closing my computer at the end of the day doesn't mean that I walk out the door right away. Like I don't need long, but I do need a minute or two. And I need to just breathe and just sit for a second. I need a threshold moment before I transition those roles. And it's interesting you say that, Neal, because when I was in California, like, man, I dreaded those traffic drives home, and I dreaded and I wanted to be home so quickly, and I wished that wasn't there. And then once it was removed, I realized the value, I think, of being able to have a transition that was taken care of for me, no matter what I wanted to do. Sorry about it. Like that was like, I had to deal with that. And so I do think it's interesting for those parents working at home, the ways in which we can utilize tools to create a transition that puts up perhaps some artificial boundaries that make that a little bit easier. Because I do think that's a hard one, right? Especially, in growing a company, in Neal, in growing your role, I'm sure you feel that as well. Like you want to be both places at both times. And it doesn't mean that I'm less of an executive at my company or less of a parent to be pulled in both directions kind of all the time.
You're running a startup, Nicholas, and that's, like high performance in itself. Yeah. So, usually the usual startup founder never really like sleeps or does much. And then you have 3 kids on top. But what would you wish to be able to implement in your company for your employees that also have family, that makes their life easier and that will help them to navigate this space much better?
Yeah, I'm fortunate that if we're going to be honest to who we are, we need to live our company mission inside the organization if I'm going to properly coach and come alongside those external, right? And so I can't meet with somebody or have our team meet with somebody and help them navigate this complexity by having them create those threshold moments, create a space in between. If we're not living that ourselves, that's not going to work, right? In addition to kind of being disingenuous, it's just actually not going to work, right? You really have to be true to who you are from a values perspective. And so within our organization, there is a lot of freedom of space. If there's things that you need to do, if there's things that you need to take care of, then there's kind of a no questions asked a policy about that to be able to create that. And so that's one thing. The second thing that I would say is I don't believe that as an executive, we want our team members to show up anything less than 100% of themselves, because that's going to lead to the best outcome. And we also understand that nobody wants to show up at 50% for their children. And so they need to try to show up 100% in that side also. And so how do we help make sure that they have the freedom, capacity, and tools in order to do both of those things? And if one needs more attention, then we understand and are supportive of what that is. And I think about all the time a priorities list. This is something that actually Neal and I did together. But if you kind of think about, and everybody who's kind of tuning in or listening can do this as well. If you just write down your priority list between your spouse, your children, your work, your friends, your family, and you just rank them from a priority list standpoint, not by where you're spending the most time, but just a general priority list of like, what do I prioritize? And a lot of times people have trouble force ranking themselves number one, right? And I know that for so much of my career, part of it was the athletic background of like team. I was at the bottom of that list. My kids were first. And like it was a badge of honor to say that. But I think what I've slowly come to realize is if I force rank myself number one and just try to make sure I'm in a good spot, I'm going to be so much of a better parent. And if I'm in a better parent and my home life is good, I can dive so much more into work and be fully present there. Understanding that priority list and making sure from top down, you can check off those items in the proper order, I think is really, really important. It's something that we make sure that we live internally so that we can support externally in an authentic way.
Neal, you probably come from a little bit of a different working background, but what's happening there?
The thing that comes to mind for me is I feel like my role as a manager is something that I do take serious, and I feel like it's a very sacred position that you hold. And because of all the things that we've talked about so far, where yes, there is work, but at the same time, everyone who is your direct report has a life outside of work. And so for me, it really is just so important to acknowledge that. One of the ways that I derive meaning in my life is this idea of the ripple effect that, the way that whether it is in my coaching work or whether it is as a manager, that I engage with the individual, that's not just going to impact them in that moment, but it's also going to impact everyone that they then engage with, whether later in the day or later the next day and so on and so forth. And that ripple will continue and continue. And so I say that to say, when I'm working with a direct report, I'm thinking, I want to know like how they are doing. And, I want to be able to not just confine our conversations to this small lens of just work, because at the end of the day, if work is really stressful, like I want to be able to support them, because it's not just going to impact them now, but it's going to impact them when they do close their laptop and they engage with their children and their spouse and so on and so forth. And I think, it's creating that culture where it is safe to talk about these things, to really instill vulnerability and create those spaces and opportunities to really support folks, not just in the moment through the work, but also so that when they do close their laptop at the end of the day, they're not bringing all of that stuff in. And so it's up to me as a manager to hold my own boundaries and really encourage them to do the same.
There's still this myth out there that if you're a parent, like you can't perform 100% anymore at work, especially maybe more for a female, but I don't know what you get. I had that when my second son was born and I went down on 70%. So, and then they told me always, oh, you're never there. And I'm like, 70%? So I'm only 30% not there mathematically. And yeah. I work a lot harder in these 70%. And how do you see that at the moment? Do we still have these expectations, or does it ease out a little bit for people?
I'll give you my perspective on from our side of things. Is a lot of times we see that the opposite is possible when the framing is done correctly. And any of us who have children that are here today know that the meaning of your life shifts. Like it is a shift that happens, right? And it's like the beauty, in my opinion, of parenting is you're never not parenting. Just because I'm not standing in front of my child doesn't mean I'm not parenting, right? When I'm driving in the car and they're not with me, like I'm driving the speed limit And I'm doing that obviously for a lot of safety reasons, but like I want to do the right thing because I've got to answer to my child later in the day, why did I do this or that? And so I think about parenting for me is 24/7, whether I'm in front of my child or not. And so that also adds up to showing up for work. As you mentioned, right, running a startup, building a company, like I am trying to lead an example for my children in how I show up and how I perform and how I lean into what I'm doing. That has, I believe, has actually elevated what I'm doing from a performance lens. And because I felt that myself, it becomes a lot easier to then lead and make sure others on our team can start to view through that same lens. I think that because the meaning of your life and can shift in such a dramatic way, that can be harnessed in a really powerful, positive way for the way in which you show up in some of these spaces.
Do you have the feeling that as a founder of a startup, you can still show up on 100% when you are on the tasks with your startup?
Absolutely. So long as my home life is in a good spot.
Love it.
So that's why I come back to that priority list, right?
Yes.
If my cup needs to be as full as it can be, so that I need to take time to take care of myself, away from my family, away from work, right? Before we started this call, we were talking about sports. Like that's a big thing for me. Like I like to go to live sporting events. That fills my cup. I need to make sure that I'm literally scheduling that and making sure that that's happening every now and then, because it feels like if it recharges me, right? It fills my cup. If I'm doing that, then and my wife is doing that in her space, and we have some time together, then we are going to be in a really good spot. We're going to be show up really good for our kids. And when that is in a good spot, I can be 100% at work because I know that that's in a good spot. I can't skip steps. I can't just go into work and like leave everything that's at home, but I can when I know that that's in a good spot. So that's probably like my caveat to like how that tangibly comes to existence for me.
And I totally love that you always have to be priority number one, because when your cup's not full, then nothing can really happen, like at the same level. And that might sound selfish for some people, but I think it's actually kind to everybody else.
Yeah, I think it's a really, it's something that we see and deal with all the time. Is like self-care is not selfish. Like you take care of yourself so that you can show up for others. Like that is actually how it shows up. A lot of times people push back against that because they have some identity of servant leadership or putting others first or putting their children first, whatever the case might be. Even to the parenting realm of this, I know my own children, again, 14, 11, and 9, they would prefer me to make sure that I take care of myself because they like hanging out with me when my cup is full. Like if I don't do any of that and I like am constantly like, no, I'm putting the kids first, I'm doing what they want all the time. They don't like that version as much, and they can articulate that to me even at that young age, right? And so it's taking care of yourself so that you can show up for other people.
Neal.
Yeah, if I can, I want to acknowledge the gender question in the chat because I think it's so important. Specifically, I've heard it said a great dad is a mediocre mom, and I totally agree from the lens of like, the expectations specifically for women have been so high. And now here I am, I come into my role as I think a father, and there's like the expectations I feel like are catching up, I'll say, to where, I'm out in public, I have the stroller, you get looks, you have comments being made where it's like, oh, you're such a great dad. And I know for a fact that same thing would not be said to a woman doing the same thing. It's kind of just historically for some time been expected. And I say that through the lens of like work. I think it's important to acknowledge that because to the comment, I feel lucky where I feel like I can show up to work where, I can be a dad and I can be praised for that. And where a woman and a mother may come in and they won't get that same grace. And so as a manager, like I feel like I have to constantly be thinking about that. And it is even interesting, like here we are right now. It's interesting to be talking about parenting, having two dads on the panel. I think it's unique. In one way, it's great because we are starting to have these conversations. We're hopefully starting to increase the level of expectations that we want to get to as dads. And I think that's awesome. And we need to also acknowledge that I think there's a long way to go. And as managers, as workplace, we need to be able to combat the stereotypes and the expectations that certainly have not been the same. So as a manager, I need to recognize that and be able to educate myself and be able to take those things into consideration when I am going about my day to day.
Yes, it's such a good point. I remember when I had my first being at the park with her and having somebody who knew that the child was my child was like, "Oh, you're babysitting today?" I was like, like babysitting so that the mom could. And I was like, "No, like this is like, we're friends too. It's my child. We like to hang out every now and then." I don't know what, but yeah, that perception is an interesting one. And I do think to also what happened in the chat, we see it is a very, very, very difficult leap for typically the moms to invest in themselves as opposed to take on the weight of all of it all the time. And we see it in terms of like as simple as enrollment in our programs. We have specific women's health programs that involve looking at everything from blood tests and even hormone testing and all of that to be able to kind of help come up with plans to help from an energy and a sleep, et cetera. But the crossroads moment of, okay, now I'm going to literally invest dollars in myself, that is a really, really, really challenging moment for so many females that are moms that come through our program where they are weighing that against, well, what if I paid this for my child to do something or get my child this or that? And it's interesting to see that dynamic play out of understanding that this is actually for your child or for your work. If you can do that, right? This is actually what they want. But the gender dynamic is very, very interesting, I think. And to Neal's point, having two dads on here talking about this is it didn't strike me till you just said that, Neal, but it's a pretty interesting one for sure.
I love that you mentioned the program and that women investing dollars in themselves. Is that different for the guys enrolling in the programs?
Definitely. It's a combination of two things. If I'm gonna, like, I suppose a little bit stereotype and sort of dwindle it down. Obviously, this isn't 100% the case all the time. Most of the time, the males will think about this in terms of performance optimization, and they'll get it right, and they're happy to do it. Most of the time, the females will think about this as like selfish, and that is like the oversimplification of it, but we see that a lot until they get into the program and realize and can feel the ripple effects and can feel like, oh, I didn't have a short of a temper after dinner with my child. And so like me doing this, actually, I can see how that transferred down. They need to have to see and feel that as opposed to make that, I think that connection. A lot of times that's the conversation that we end up having. How do you think we can change that narrative? That is a really big question, Rebecca. I think I know. I think a couple things. One is, first off, the weight of, let's call it the household or the parenting and the family can't fall disproportionately on the mom because they're already starting from a place that like is a lot more to take on, right? I would say even if two parents are working parents, the males will think about, oh, this is going to help me be better at work. The females are thinking like, is this going to help me be better at home? It may help me be better at work too, but that's not the first thing. And so I think a lot of the times making sure that the weight of what happens at home is evenly distributed is like a first pass so that they're having the same starting point to be able to understand like where they can level up and how that would impact kind of everything across the board. And so that takes an equal share of duties at home, right? I'm speaking in my own house, lots of times like is it my turn to kind of handle putting the kids to bed or is my wife doing that? Or and sometimes I have friends where there's like roles are just separated and like he's taking out the trash every time, no matter what, and she's doing the bath and bed no matter what every time. And those things aren't kind of always equal. So I think it's got to start from like, are we starting at the same point from the weight that everybody's carrying for what's at home to know how to invest?
I'll also add to, I think about the best thing if you want your child to make changes or grow is to model that behavior. And so if you want them to read, you should be reading yourself. You want them to eat healthy, you should be modeling that as well. Same with like emotional regulation and things like that. And I think, again, getting back to the point that with high performing, high level, women executives being able to have these conversations, and the men as well, being able to speak more to these things, to model, to show that this is okay, and to create the culture, through the organization and the workplace, that it is okay to engage in these things. It is okay to have these conversations. Obviously, there is a lot of work to be done, and many folks, understandably so, because of historically, are going to feel nervous about sharing these things. And so I do think it comes from, the top down, that we have to be creating the culture where it is safe to do so.
Thank you.
Yeah, I think the modeling is really important, Neal. I think that, like I said before, like you're never not parenting, right? So like how you handle a tense situation at work. I think you just need to be thinking about, if my child was a fly on the wall, like how would they see this, or what would they react to this, right? And because at some point your child is going to have a tough conversation at a workplace. To think that those things are disconnected, I think is not reality, right? And so it's about giving yourself as many tools as possible, so that as many situations, you have as many different options to go to be able to model and live in a way which you kind of want that to pass down.
I love the fly on the wall because I have one older child. He likes to be standing around the corner sometimes when I have meetings, and then he asks me the questions and why we've been discussing this and why my tone was like that. So they will become like that. And then you will always have to try, or like aim to live as an example as well.
Yeah, they'll never listen to what you say, but they'll know how you say it. That is for sure.
That's part of being a parent, like in the end. But let's bring what you're also doing professionally into the room, because I think it's so helpful to use wearables in one way or the other to kind of like monitor, like what you said before, putting yourself first. Yeah. Your own well-being, your sleep is a big part of it. Your like heart rate is a big part of it. How fast your pulse is coming down, stress levels and all that. So where do you think that can really help in navigating this?
There's a couple of things. One is the compartmentalizing of people are able to be very, very good at that, which in many cases is incredibly beneficial and helpful. It also then, by definition, right, puts these things in different compartments and we don't actually sit and deal with them. So it all starts to compound. I think about the term of stress in general. Stress, in my opinion, is not a bad thing, right? If you want to get better at just about anything, we better be okay with stress. Certainly, if you want to start a family, you better be okay with stress. That comes with it. Start a business, even thinking about like athletics. If you want to get stronger, you have to go to the weight room and apply stress to your body on purpose. That's how that goes. There is a capacity that we have to handle the stress or strain that we're under. Internally, our body doesn't distinguish between physical, mental, emotional, spiritual stress, right? It needs a response to all of it. And so the wearable becomes very, very helpful to give a little bit of metrics to how are you doing? Holistically, how are you doing? And so if we can understand the lens of which to view the data and understand that it's a tool, it's not going to dictate our day. It's not going to tell us how we're going to feel. It's not going to, there's a lot of psychology that needs to go into place there. You can't just like throw these things out to everybody. They got to be ready to absorb the information and how it looks. But you can start to understand then this is where I am, which then really helps with, then here's the tool that's needed at this moment to help me be the best that I can be right now. And it is most of the time incredibly simple, typically free. It's available to all of us. You mentioned sleep. People's understanding of actually how much they're sleeping is wildly different than what they think they're sleeping. I think just as an oversimplification, people get into bed at a certain time and they get out of bed at a certain time. And the percentage of that time that they're sleeping is very, very different than that total time that they're in bed. And so, and the things that impact their sleep. I'll give you an example for me. When I put my phone away from my bed and started reading a book, my restorative sleep, the combination of my deep sleep and REM sleep, went up by almost 14%. So like every day, I was recharging considerably more if I just was reading a book. And I wasn't even on social media. I just read on my phone. I was reading a book instead of reading on the phone. And like that difference, it's made such a difference to me that I felt more recharged in the morning. And then when I see the data and say like, oh, that actually like, okay, this is confirming what I feel. Now the next night, my fork in the road moment is I know that my body responds to this. This is actually good for me personally. Now that decision is a lot different, and I'm reading a lot more, and then my sleep is considering to get better and better. And so then that's obviously what leads into so many other things the next day when I have that kind of recharge going. There are very simple things like that. If I go into the world of parenting, fortunate to do a lot of work with first responders, a lot of police that we have to work with. The stress that they're under on a given day is astronomical. And they go home and their gas tank is on empty, completely understandable. And they go home and their 9-year-old son is being a 9-year-old son. And it's not his fault that he's a 9-year-old son. That's what he is. But they have no fuse whatsoever. And so
there's no full cup.
No full cup, right? And so when they are able to recognize that in advance and say, hey, before I go inside, I'm just going to do a 1-minute breath work, 60 seconds, or I'm going to take a walk around the block. Or when I go in, I'm not going to get a beer first because I feel the weight of this. And that's what I think I want. But what I actually want is I just want to sit for a second. And all of a sudden, like the ripple effects of how that can really impact so many things, from how you show up to relationships to like everything on down the line. And it's because they have an awareness of their body that is really, really, really important.
I so love that you were just like saying this, the transition, you mentioned the transitioning before, but also for those that have a maybe high stress job. My mom was a nurse, and I remember that she always wanted to ride her bike to work, no matter what. Mm-hmm. And maybe one of the reasons was that it really helped her transition and come down after work. So she arrived at home usually a lot more relaxed than I remember her on the days that she just came up for me, she used the car or things when she had to pick us then up and needed the car and all these things. So I think there's a big part of that in there as well. But you wanted to add something to that, Neal. And I think we can bring in also your coaching perspective now in combination with using these wearables, because I saw you wearing your Aura ring as well today. So how we can bring in the human factor of coaching to really support with the technology, these high performance moments as well for people.
Yeah. Well, I love that you mentioned like you as a child noticing those things. It just highlights our children's awareness. And also, Nick, I like that you had mentioned specifically the reading a book, which same thing happened with me. And I think we all know these things, right? We know blue light is bad. We know like reading prior to bed is good, but it is really hard to implement those things. And I think what's interesting with wearables is, I can read an article that's going to tell me those things, but until I actually see that reflected in the data, I'm not going to necessarily be convinced or even feel like, okay, this is reason for me to make this change. But when I started to do those things, started reading instead of scrolling on my phone at night, and then to your point, Nick, see it in the data, that was really powerful and really gave me the motivation to make those changes. What also, to the coaching point, I think that gives motivation and what's really interesting and where I think coaches can really offer support is, one, yes, they can help to interpret the data really well and make it work for your life. What was interesting when I went through the Coya program was we talk a lot about like our why. Why are we doing this? And so naturally, the reason why I wanted to take care of my health, the first thing I thought was I want to be able to play with my child for as long as I can. As I age, I want to be able to throw them up in the air. I want to play, sports with them, do all those things. And that sounds like a really great why. And that's probably the why for a lot of people. What I realized in working with my coach was that why is actually pretty far away. And so it's kind of hard to motivate myself by using that why. And so getting a little bit more, okay, if that's a little far, that doesn't feel as motivating, as great as it sounds and as warm as it makes me when I say those things, it's not today, it's not tomorrow. And so when I started to think about my why, when I was doing those little things, the habits and drinking my water and getting a bit of movement and exercise and breathing and prioritizing my sleep, I felt really good. And I was able to show up those days as my best self with my child. And so that really, through working with my coach, became like more of my why. It's like, yes, I want to be this person 10 years down the road. But today, I want to be the best version of myself. I want to be present with my child. I want to be not thinking about work. And through all of those like habits that I worked with a coach, I was able to identify and then figure out like how we can make that work. And so I think that for me, that was really eye-opening in the sweet spot. And I think just knowing the information and knowing what my why is, I would have never gotten to that place through technology, but I did through human interaction, through bouncing ideas, through reflections and everything else that happens in that one-to-one human interaction that I think is really hard to replicate through technology.
Yeah, I think this probably something Neal and I both are like super aligned on is that I think coaching is about human connection. And I think it's something that the technology, in my opinion, will never get there. It will never make that mix. I think it can make life easier and all that sort of thing, but real impact comes from the human connection. And I think that there are ways to supplement and give tools to that. And certainly wearables, I think, are a great one for it. But having somebody sit with Neal and get to know him as a person and have Neal trust that person back to be able to have those conversations is where really the rubber meets the road and there could be some traction.
Yeah. I want to add too, I think parents are lonely. When you look at the statistics, I think it's 2/3 of parents report loneliness. If you look at like the pushback of AI, the biggest pushback of AI comes from like creative professions, right? It's the writers, it's the directors, it's the musicians. That's really where the pushback more often, the kind of like clear lines oftentimes are drawn. And all other, creative professions, I like to argue that I feel like coaching is a creative profession. Like we have theories, we have ways to engage. And there is also just a level of creativity and presence and really being there in that moment that allows for behavior change to happen. And you can look at like all of what the research shows through in a therapeutic relationship, and that relationship itself is really what leads to effectiveness, whether it's in therapy, whether it is in coaching. And so I think there's no way for us to really replicate that. Like an AI, let's say chatbot, can mimic those things. But if a parent is lonely, are they really getting anything out of, is it healthy per se? And is it a relationship that is going to truly lead to behavior change if there really isn't a relationship? Because we can't have a relationship, I would argue, and maybe that'll change in the future for better or for worse, but with an AI interaction.
And I think the important part, what you were just saying, is about behavior change and accountability. And I had another discussion in a previous podcast with Diane Fournier from the National Board of Health and Wellness Coaching, also around, like wearables and devices. And it's so easy to turn them off. They don't hold you accountable. But having a human in the loop, or in the picture, or a coach, or a colleague, or maybe your partner or best friend that you can discuss these things with, that really leads to more behavior change and more accountability in the picture. Do you see that similar?
Yeah, I mean, I've engaged with AI like therapy chatbot before, and I snoozed the notifications and didn't feel any accountability or remorse doing. It's very easy. So
I think it's actually growing in importance, right? I think as AI has grown and become something that is involved in our life in so many different spaces, I want to say unintended consequences, and that's probably not the right terminology, but maybe something that wasn't considered at the time is that's not replacing, in my opinion, anything. That's also raising the value of human to human because we just don't have it as much. We realize how important it is. We realize what we feel is different and all those sort of things. And so I come from a place of realizing that, or call it placing my bets on, as AI continues to grow and be in so many parts of our life, we're going to gravitate towards those times that are human to human connection even more, right? They're going to be even more special. We're going to need them and be thirsty for them and be looking for that human to human connection time. Certainly thinking back to COVID of like times where all of a sudden there was less interaction with people. Man, did that really make me want to have that interaction and like realize how much like that meant to me and how much that happened. And I feel like as people are getting a little bit more siloed and AI is a way people are interacting in so many different places where maybe it previously would have been a person, I think the human element is going to be elevated in importance even more so.
And I love that you're saying that, because AI also brings in what someone else mentioned before, more cognitive load, or more overwhelm as well, because there's so much happening out there that we can't stay up to date with, and all the things that we kind of like have to do now or try to learn and add to the whole workload we're having anyways. I think that's a very interesting discussion as well to have.
Yeah, absolutely. I see Ava popped that an aha moment question in the chat. And I will say, to get to that, not to derail you, Rebecca, but to get to that, I think that coming back to even some of the things that Neal said that kind of worked and showed up for him, the biggest aha moment, I think, for parents is the way in which they can add a little bit to their cup to keep it a little bit closer to full by doing something that takes a very, very, very short amount of time. Mm-hmm. Right. Most of the time people think, and parents certainly, like, I got to get a babysitter and I got to go away for a night, or I got to go away for a weekend. And the reality is you can get so much of that if I just take a walk around the block once. Like, that is the impact, I think, is so great compared to the time spent to do the thing most of the time, as opposed to needing something really big and gigantic.
Yeah, agree. Consistency, it really is like everything. That was my biggest takeaway, was the small moments and little things that I could do that would have a really big difference. And I think you're seeing, at least I see at work, more people are on walking desks and doing other things and taking calls, and like more that we can do that and encourage that, I think the better.
I love that. I even don't take my phone now with me when I go for a walk with the dog, because
Beautiful.
You tend to just then put your headphones in, or if then I listen to music. But I mean, I have a dog only 1.5 years old, so she needs a lot of attention still. Mm-hmm. But it's nice because you're out in the nature. There's a park. You totally disconnect because it's a different environment, and then you get back. So I love these small little things that you can do in your daily routines without having to organize the weekend away or the night away, or, like a date night with your partner, which sometimes just doesn't work out in the daily thing. So thank you so much for the discussion that we had so far. I would really love to open the room now for some of the questions in the audience. Like, if you want to ask a question here now, you can just open up your mic. We can also look again to the questions in the chat and see if there's anything popping up. Does anybody want to ask a question to Nick or Neal?
A friend of mine who recently actually also became a mother, she told me that she finds it so bizarre that when actually people are expecting their first child, they spend so much time preparing the birth, but all the years beyond that, of course, miraculous day and event, it's kind of being neglected in the preparation of becoming a parent. So I'm very curious if both of you could go back to that point in time when you realized that you were actually becoming a parent. What would you start doing right away to actually prepare yourself for becoming a parent?
Yeah. First off, be remiss to not start where Neal and I spoke previously of that is a very different moment, even in a time in the relationship and all of it, for the dad than for the mom, right? I have a very minimal relationship while the baby is growing inside my wife's belly than she has, right? And for me, so much of it disproportionately started at a specific day of which I got to hold the baby. And so that was one thing that once we got to child 2 and 3 was sort of easier for my wife and I to talk about, if I'm being totally honest with you, that she has a really strong connection and a bond. And I didn't have that in the beginning, right? And so that day was when kind of it started so much more for me. But I would say if I could go back and have that, it would be, I suppose, a little bit of a broken record here, but it would be me turning internally into the things that I can start doing and building so that I had some habits in place that were a little bit more fortified by the time that, life gets kind of thrown around when you have a baby. You certainly lose a little bit of control of when you can sleep and how much you can sleep and all that sort of stuff. And I was okay with that, with a little bit of that, call it chaos, that everything gets to settle into new rhythms that happen. But I think if I could go back, I would have probably set some rhythms for myself that I would like to have ideally gotten back to. So that way I had some sort of light post. I think what my experience was, everything got kind of like jumbled in those first little bit where you're trying to figure out what's going on and which way is up and how do people have time to shower? Like, I just brush your teeth. This is amazing. And so give me like a little bit of a light post of like, I'd like to work my way back to over here instead of just being like, let's see how where this goes and let's just take it day by day.
Yeah, not too much to add. I would agree with everything you said. And one of the vivid moments I have is walking through our front door and just my wife and I looking at each other and being like, holy crap, like we're parents. It is our responsibility now to take care of this human. We're now outside of the confines of the hospital and like how much support they were giving. And it's really us to figure it out. And I think then maybe we had a doctor's appointment in a few days and then those continued to spread out and out. But to that point, so much of our energy naturally and biologically, especially for women, is tied to taking care of the baby, that we do lose sight of taking care of ourselves. And that was, if I could go back, I mean, I absolutely would do the same thing, where just really trying to prioritize myself and sleep and also my relationship too. I think it is one of those things where both parties are experiencing a lot of transition and stress. And so when I can reach out to the grandparents and say, hey, can you watch him so we can, go out, just grab a bite to eat and continue to prioritize our relationship in that way, I think I would lean into a bit more.
Thank you. David, you have a question.
So I love the intentionality you guys are bringing to the topics. And Neal and Nicholas, y'all are in beautifully different places in the parenting arc, right? And therefore, Neal, paying attention to your relationship. There's that piece is, yes, you're in a lot of transition now with a 1-year-old and you with 3 and those fabulously crazy teen years, tween and teen, as the world changes around you and not just adding in kids using technology and those other pieces, right? But as parameters of parenting and relationships change, how are you guys looking at building in, redesigning the partnership with your spouse, right? Because you may design the relationship when you get married, you may just redesign a little bit as you're about to become parents. And then all hell breaks loose because you have children and you no longer feel like you're in control. So how are you bringing that conscious awareness into keeping the relationship design fresh and refreshed?
Yep. Great question. What comes to mind for me, this hearing you say that, is first off, my view of the relationship with my wife is she's the person that I want to be sleeves rolled up trying to figure this all out with, not somebody that like I'm doing my thing and like she's going to be my partner and all this. Like the amount of times I've heard people say like, I don't know, this is like this thing that this person does is going to bother me in 30 years of living with them or whatever else. And like, for me, that was never like in the equation. It's like, I'm assuming that all of this is going to go haywire for now till forever. Is this the person I want to lock arms with and say, like, let's try to figure this out? That was the thought process around it, more than do we have the answers? Is like, do I want to be in the foxhole trying to figure it out? And so just, I think that mindset has really helped our relationship, number one. And number two is I come back to the priorities list. And there are times in my marriage and parenting where I got working too much. And we didn't have time together. And so then that meant the time we did have together was strictly logistical. Who are you taking where tomorrow? Who am I taking where tomorrow? And that became a business in the same way that my work was. It was not a personal relationship. And that was always the fork in the road moment where it started to get off the rails. And so making sure that I'm not going to transition into anything until that's in a better spot. And that takes time. Making sure that that's prioritized from a time perspective.
To add, I would just say life is hard. Parenting is incredibly hard as well. And I think people talk a lot about marriage is hard, but to your point, like it really is. You've chosen someone to work through these hard things together, and ideally they make it better for you. And so it's easy to confuse those things. It's like, it's parenting that is hard. It's not necessarily the relationship. And so leaning into it, I think the only other thing I'll say is just the intentionality. Like there was a lot more spontaneity that was able to exist prior to having kids. And now it is really planning date night, and it's every week, let's do something together and put it on the calendar and make sure you have things planned in advance. And you can still bring in spontaneity in like other ways. And I still think that's important. But there is a level of planning that needs to take place. Otherwise, it's very easy to go a month and look back and be like, crap, we haven't had a date night in 4 or 5 weeks. We got to get on that. And so, yeah, I think that intentionality is super important.
And if I may add something to that, we do the delegation poker here as well at home. Yeah, we both my husband's also in IT. And so our Sunday evening is always the connecting and planning evening. And then it's also kind of like which percentage of, like the load you can share for that week as well. And I love that you say that that's our plan, for the planning part. But then you also have to have these little moments in between, we love to do the high fives. Both kids are in school. That's a win. And there were no major dramas leaving the house in the morning. I mean, like this Monday was amazing. So no dramas. Both kids were out. And then you just need to have this little time. If it's just 5 minutes to have a cup of tea and just celebrate. Give yourself this high five and just acknowledge each other to have this relationship still going, because I mean, it's crazy if both work and you have kids and have to manage all that. And then always continuously through the different phases, we would then also reallocate, like I started working only 50% and then we switched around after a year because we saw that, I wanted to work more and my husband wanted to work less. And so we've been kind of constantly doing these deals on who works how much and how can we make it work and who can we bring in to renegotiate. It's like recontracting, no, David, a little bit in coaching. It's something that you have to do in your relationship too. My husband's just waiting for me now to step up even more so he can just go down on his 70, 80% again. And it's a nice thing to still stay connected. Yeah, and that's what I hear from Nicholas and Neal as well, even though you're in different phases.
Absolutely.
So what did you do, David? So how did you make it work? You're further down the road.
My God, yeah, our eldest is 32 and we've been together 35 years, known each other since we were 11 and 12.
Ooh.
We learned about 10 years in that we had gotten caught up in the traffic management, the logistics, and we were missing the date nights and the connection times and those pieces. And that was a bumpy transition, was trying to reconnect to ourselves and our relationship with 3 kids out in the wild, and they were all wild. It really was, the relationship sort of got backseated, and we started to see that pattern that, marriage is the hardest work you'll ever do, but if you do it every day, it ain't that hard. And staying in that practice of staying connected with each other. Because, like you said, Nicholas, lock arms with in the foxhole, there's no one I'd rather go through this craziness with than Elaine. The trick is we just have to remember to keep that connection. And we've gotten really good at reminding us when we both go drifting off, consumed by work or whatever else is going on in our world. So it's being part of the partnership is reminding each other. And that's become our saving grace.
I think similar to self-care too, lots of times it might not even take a full date night, right? It's like, let's just not do the laundry after the kids go to bed and let's just sit for a second. And it's like, yes, that means more laundry tomorrow, but it's just better that way, right? And so sometimes it's, I think a lot of times people confuse amount of time as really the barrier, and it's not at all for so many of these things.
Yeah, it's like, stop thinking about where am I going to find the time? It's you carve out time. There's no time to be found. Yeah. So it's like carving out the time for what's important. Yeah, that was a big shift for us.
I love that because we always have the time if we make it a priority.
Oh, yeah.
Yep.
And saying that, there's a priority in front of my door because my son's like, 5 o'clock, Mom, you promised me to go for ice cream. So it's good to have your reminders. That's my accountability. He's always on time. Yeah, and that's not just because he's German. So unfortunately, we have to end the session now. It was so amazing. And thanks for everyone chipping in. Thank you, Nick and Neal, for joining the session today and sharing all your experiences and your thoughts. And I'm really looking forward and seeing everyone, or especially the 2 of you, in New York. Thank you.
Yeah, bye. Can't wait.
Thanks, everybody.
Nicholas said something that got me thinking, that we're never not parenting. Even when we think our kids aren't watching, they're absorbing everything. How we talk about our work, how we treat ourselves, whether we actually take the break we said we needed. And it is the same for our teams and co-workers. And here's what hit me. We spent years trying to be present for our kids, for our teams, our friends, and immediate families. But are we always present for ourselves? Neal and Nicholas flipped that script. Putting yourself first is not selfish. It's the only way to show up as the parent, the leader, the friend, and the person you want to be. What would it look like if you invested in yourself with the same intentionality you invest in your kids, your work, your team? Not someday, not when things calm down, but now. Because the ripple effect of how we show up doesn't just touch our work. It shapes the humans we're raising and those we're leading. That's it for today's episode of The Edge of Human and AI, a Viva la Coaching podcast. If this conversation opened something up for you, the best thing you can do is share it. Send it to a colleague, a client, a fellow coach, anyone who's asking the same questions you are. The more of us standing at this edge, the better the conversation gets. Follow us on your favorite podcast app so you never miss an episode. And come find us at vivalacoaching.com, where you'll find resources, community, and conversations you won't find anywhere else. We'll be back next week with another voice from the edge. Until then, come stand with us at the edge.